Welcome to our fifth lecture of the Arts and Humanities Fall Series hosted by the Foundation of Wayne Community College. I am Charlotte Brow, the Arts and Humanities Director, and it is our pleasure to have you join us tonight in this virtual format. We are delighted tonight to have Allison Daly present Realistic Hope, Hans Rosling's Optimistic Fact-Based Future, and we could all use a hopeful perspective in these trying times. You will have an opportunity to ask Allison questions, posting them in the chat feature in YouTube. At the end of the lecture, our moderator, Diane Belmont, of the Foundation team, will read your questions from the chat. When you post there, you will be asked to create a channel which is no more than your name if you have a Gmail account, or YouTube will actually walk you through it if you don't have a Gmail account, if you have a different type of account. Now, Allison encourages everyone to open the survey link and complete it before her lecture. You can do that if you want. If you would like to participate, it's in the chat box, but it's also found below the media player in YouTube. You'll see it there. Or just enjoy the presentation. Introducing Allison tonight is Andrea Fraley, a beloved communications instructor at Wayne Community College. She's president of the Arts Council of Wayne County and is a partner with Allison in creating the North Carolina Scholars of Global Distinction program for our campus. Not sure I got that right. I did? Good. Thank you, Andrea.
Good evening, everyone. It is my pleasure to introduce to you today my colleague and friend, Allison Daly. To any of us who know Allison, we know that she is passionate about the architecture of peace. As an instructor, she spends much of her time learning. She's constantly reading, researching, and reflecting on subjects ranging from foreign policy to creative approach techniques to enhance her classroom. And her methods work. Students in Mrs. Daly's classroom fall in love with literature and appreciate the invitation to think critically. As a faculty member, I know many of our colleagues would agree that we are blessed to have her in our division. Although Allison teaches English, her office is typically filled with one of us brainstorming methods or looking for ideas to enhance our own subjects. And she is always willing to share and collaborate. As a global leader, Mrs. Daly is an ambassador for the Fulbright Teachers for Global Classrooms. She is also alumni of the U.S. State Department Teaching Excellence and Achievement Program. She has been invited to teach in Europe and has written and edited multiple books with faculty from around the world. As her colleague, I am honored to be her partner in bringing the North Carolina Scholars of Global Distinction program to Wayne Community College. It was our dream to create a truly global campus, and on October 14th, WCC and UNC Worldview held the official signing ceremony to kick off this partnership. I know that Allison is excited to share her belief that when we understand the present, we know how to improve and shape the future. And I am excited to be a part of our audience tonight. It's with great pleasure that I introduce you to my friend, Allison Daly.
Thank you, Andrea. To call her beloved is an understatement. Her students adore her. When I first imagined giving this lecture, it was last March 30th that we had it scheduled. And Andrea and I, with the help of Dr. Jenkins and a cohort of innovative teachers, were preparing to launch this new program, in partnership with Worldview, the North Carolina Scholars of Global Distinction. Andrea has been my partner every step of the way, and I'm grateful to have her here tonight. And I'm so grateful to show you what this looks like. We have an official logo. We're official. So thank you, Dr. Walker, Dr. Pfeiffer, everyone who helped us get this far, Jessica Meadows for designing the logo and Ken Jones for getting our website up and running. Students this week will be able to register for classes with a global focus, and they have the G attached to them. So tonight, as we look at the lecture, this is the kind of thing that we might do in class in order to help students see the world that they're preparing to enter. So I've set it up according to the domains of global competency that are a part of the North Carolina Scholars of Global Distinction program. The first one is to communicate ideas, then to consider diverse perspectives, to investigate the world. I'm sorry, I said that in the wrong order. Investigate the world, consider diverse perspectives, to communicate ideas after you've done the first two, and then finally to take action. Giving this speech on optimistic hope and a fact-based future is a hard sell during ordinary times. Most people seem to think that the world is getting worse, and it's really hard to convince them that in a lot of measurable ways it's actually getting better. So Charlotte Brow asked me, how about if we reschedule your talk for November 2nd? So here we are in the middle of a pandemic, the night before a contentious presidential election, with all the world watching, talking about optimism. And I am delighted to introduce you to Hans Rosling, who describes his book, Factfulness, 10 Reasons Why We're Wrong About the World and Why Things Are Better Than You Think, as therapy through data. He shows that true understanding is a source of peace. And I mean, look at his face. I love people who take that much joy in their work. And he definitely is that kind of person. So as an English teacher, it's sort of surprising for me to be presenting on something about global statistics. But I have students who, like, if you can't measure it, it does not exist. So for teachers out there who might be interested in these resources, I hope that you come away with something that you can use in your classroom. So if we first investigate the world, we might consider, why should we listen to Hans Rosling? What does he have to offer to us? He is a World Health Organization member. He's consulted with them. He's consulted with UNICEF. He was a medical doctor. He also was, he founded the Gapminder Foundation, which is what he says its purpose is to fight devastating ignorance with the most up-to-date statistics. But I think he's also relevant to our discussion today because he was on the ground in Africa during the Ebola crisis. And in working with his son Ola, who was in Sweden, coordinating all the statistics as they were unfolding on the ground, they were able to predict when the Ebola crisis had peaked. So they have understanding about global health, and I think that's relevant. And now we are going to get into the quiz. So I had about 70 responses to the quiz, so these are based on those responses. The Gapminder Institute, this is Hans Rosling's quiz. He has 13 questions on his, and I took 10 of those. And 10 that I think show, why we misunderstand global statistics and what we can learn from them. So this shows our reading of that question. We said that poverty was cut in half. Only 21% of the people taking the quiz said that. Poverty stays the same, 21% said that. Most people thought that poverty had doubled in the last 20 years, instead of what it really has done, which is that it's been cut in half. Well, that's a gross misunderstanding of the way the world really is, but it's hard to convince people that that is true. So I'm going to let Hans do that, and I have brought in one of his videos. It's only 4 minutes long, and I'd like to sort of prep you for it a little bit. He's got it set up on a grid or graph. So the x-axis is how much wealth countries have, and the y-axis is how long life estimates were. And he takes statistics for over 200 years for every single country. He shows you the countries as a bubble, and he color codes them. So a large country like China is going to be a big bubble, and it'll be red. All the Asian countries are red. They're color coded by their region or by their continent. So I'm going to turn this over to him and let you see what the human story is in the last 20 years and how poverty really has been cut in half.
Visualization is right at the heart of my own work too. I teach global health. And I know having the data is not enough. I have to show it in ways people both enjoy and understand. Now, I'm going to try something I've never done before. Animating the data in real space, with a bit of technical assistance from the crew.
So, here we go. First, an axis for health. Life expectancy, from 25 years to 75 years. And down here, an axis for wealth, income per person, $400, $4,000, and $40,000. So down here is poor and sick, and up here is rich and healthy. Now, I'm going to show you the world 200 years ago, in 1810. Here come all the countries. Europe brown, Asia red, Middle East green, Africa south of Sahara blue, and the Americas yellow. And the size of the country bubbles show the size of the population. And in 1810, it was pretty crowded down there, wasn't it? All countries were sick and poor. Life expectancy were below 40 in all countries. And only UK and the Netherlands were slightly better off, but not much. And now, why start the world? The Industrial Revolution makes countries in Europe and elsewhere move away from the rest. But the colonized countries in Asia and Africa, they are stuck down there. And eventually, the Western countries get healthier and healthier. And now we slow down to show the impact of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe! And now I speed up through the 1920s and the 1930s. And in spite of the Great Depression, Western countries forge on towards greater wealth and health. Japan and some others try to follow, but most countries stay down here. Now, after the tragedies of the Second World War, we stop a bit to look at the world in 1948. 1948 was a great year. The war was over, Sweden topped the medal table at the Winter Olympics, and I was born. But the differences between the countries of the world was wider than ever. United States was in the front, Japan was catching up. Brazil was way behind, Iran was getting a little richer from oil, but still had short lives. And the Asian giants, China, India, Pakistan, Bangladesh, and Indonesia, they were still poor and sick down here. But look what is about to happen. Here we go again. In my lifetime, former colonies gained independence, and then finally they started to get healthier and healthier and healthier. And in the 1970s, then countries in Asia and Latin America started to catch up with the Western countries. They became the emerging economies. Some in Africa follows. Some Africans were stuck in civil war and others hit by HIV. And now we can see the world today in the most up-to-date statistics. Most people today live in the middle, but there are huge differences at the same time between the best of countries and the worst of countries. And there are also huge inequalities within countries. These bubbles show country averages, but I can split them. Take China, I can split it into provinces. There goes Shanghai. It has the same wealth and health as Italy today. And there is the poor inland province Guizhou. It is like Pakistan. And if I split it further, the rural parts are like Ghana in Africa.
And yet, despite the enormous disparities today, we have seen 200 years of remarkable progress. That huge historical gap between the West and the rest is now closing. We have become an entirely new converging world. And I see a clear trend into the future. With aid, trade, green technology and peace, it's fully possible that everyone can make it to the healthy, wealthy corner.
Well, what you just seen in the last few minutes is a story of 200 countries shown over 200 years and beyond. It involved plotting of 120,000 numbers. Pretty neat, huh?
Okay, maybe you see now why I think he's so charming. I do want to pull us
Here
back
come all the countries. Europe.
To this, looking at a few key places in the video. So if we look at the first part, we can see that within this small corner, this is the sick and not very long-lived and not very wealthy corner, the poor and the sick. The countries are all pretty much grouped around the bottom, and this is what most of human history was like pre-industrial revolution. Most people were poor and sick, and the average age is 40 years. Now this hides averages hide the whole human story. There is a spread. One reason that the age is so low is because child mortality rates were so high, right? So children under 5 years old, many died because of health care, the lack of health care. So when we look at how this moves, I do want us to call attention to this spot right here, so we can look at, he slows down the data so that we can absorb a really important point. And we're looking to see, why does he slow it down for the year 1917? What does he tell us? What are the two things that happened?
Of the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. What a catastrophe. And now
Okay, and we see those bubbles just drop, and we know that those represent people. The statistics and the data are representing people. And the two events are the First World War and the Spanish flu epidemic. But the bubbles bounce back. And I think that we can look at his tools as a way of looking at the human story as a story of progress and a story of human resiliency. His final summation are there are four things that are necessary in order to keep this trend going. And those are, in his view, aid, trade, green technology, and peace. So when we look at Hans Rosling as an advocate for health and wealth and prosperity, he sees those two as interconnected. Okay, so here's one of the things that he does in order to sort of make the point stick that we aren't understanding exactly what the global statistics are telling us. And he uses chimpanzees as an example of random chance. If we take the quiz and we score consistently less than 33% on a test that only has 3 options, you only had an A, a B, and a C. So if you just randomly took the quiz, we should at least get 33% right. Our goal is to beat the chimps, right? Even if we can't get 100, can we beat the chimps? And this is the other question that we consistently do not beat the chimps. So the first one was one of the worst we misunderstand, and this is one of the other ones that we misunderstand consistently. And it's girls in school. That most girls do go to at least primary school, and most people thought that it was 20%, or 40%. We've got, and it's actually improved since he made the quiz, so it's higher than that now. Now the question is, why do we get things so wrong? And one of the reasons that we get it so wrong, and students will tell you this when you ask this question in class, they know that we are influenced by the news. The news reports to us things that we see as dangerous. This is part of our human intuition to recognize danger, and the Rosslings believe that we understand this was a good part of humanity for most of human history. It kept us alive, but we sort of, our lives are just not as dangerous as they used to be. But the news keeps telling us about things that are perceived dangers. Now this year, there are real dangers. Usually they might be something that it maybe isn't quite as dangerous, like a shark attack. They gave the example of, in Sweden, that would be on the news for weeks. But it's not a very big, it's not going to affect that many people, but it would be reported as though it could. This year maybe is an anomaly because we do have things that are changing our lives. And in this year, I mean, even the pictures of COVID, they're in red, you know, to make us keep our attention, right? And I think one of the interesting things about the Rosslings is they gave the same quiz to the news media thinking, you know, are they misrepresenting what they see or do they understand? And they found out that they failed the test worse. Some of the, they gave the test in Europe and they gave it in America and they were at 4% in one place and I think 12% in another. So they actually did much, much worse than the chimps and even much worse than the general population, probably because they're in the news feed, they know about a lot of things that are happening in the world that are true. They just are misrepresented proportionately. And so our guide to ourselves is to recognize that we are influenced by both social and traditional news media, that our intuition leads us sometimes to look at what is dangerous and pay attention to it too much, that our childhoods or our rearing, we are all born in neighborhoods, but they're not necessarily representative of the entire world, but that shapes our worldview. And the last one we teachers have to take responsibility for, and that is that we tend to teach outdated information. So, you know, textbooks aren't always updated, and I know that a lot of places have sort of given up on textbooks in general. And some disciplines, maybe, you know, like English, we don't, you know, Shakespeare doesn't change very much, maybe the translation of it does, but there are a lot of disciplines that it's very important to keep up to date. Sociology, the sciences. So we're going to take a look at one of the tools, and especially for teachers or students doing research, this would be considered a popular but credible source. So these are some of the Gapminder tools you can go in and use and manipulate. And so this one is based on how much money per day people have lived on for the last 220 years. And this particular graph is going to grow over time, but notice how the extreme poverty rate is down here on level 1. And I think this is a very good visual for showing us how that outmoded view of the world can really hurt us. Because if we are thinking of the world as divided into a rich and a poor, I think this will show us that it's actually divided into 4 categories. So if we start it in 1819, we still see the Industrial Revolution first hitting other parts of the world, coming to America about the 1880s, getting into full swing. And we see wealth growing, we see population growing as this moves. When we get into the 1970s and 80s, this is the model that a lot of us were taught growing up, that the world is divided into rich and poor. It looks like a 2-humped camel, right? But this, and often we're taught that the gap is widening. And if we look at, compare that to today, this is 2019, the picture is very, very different. We don't have a division between rich and poor. We have most people are in the middle. And this most people are in the middle shows us how much the global marketplace has changed and is continuing to change. When we talk about, you know, people looking for jobs and not understanding what that global marketplace is, if we don't realize that there are a huge amount of consumers that might need services we have, or we might want to engage with them, this shows us how the world has really shifted. And we can look at it that's still color-coded by the world regions, and you can come in and manipulate and choose the countries, highlight them, or you can select them over here. So this is a really good tool to show students or let them to play in, and they can sort of compare 2 countries. And the last one I'm going to show you, and this is really about looking at diverse perspectives. This resource was developed by the Rosslings, but Ola's wife, Anna, is the one who developed this one. I think this is an incredible story because what she's done is actually go all over the world, her team, and take pictures of families and how they live. So if we're talking about in our program, consulting diverse perspectives, certainly we cannot understand the whole world without numbers. But we also can't only understand it through numbers. We need to understand it through people as well. And this allows us to look at those 4 levels of wealth so that we can see level 1, and that you can filter it by country. 2, whoops, and you can actually look at the family standing in front of their home. Whoops, disappeared. There we go. We can look at people standing in front of their homes. You can look at how they sleep, what sorts of pets they have, what they eat for dinner, and you can see that I think this is one of the most powerful things about using the tools together. You can see that the people at level 4, this top level over here, they actually have more in common, even though they might live in different places, than people say on level 2. People on level 2 have a lot in common. The 4 levels, to kind of characterize them, level 1, people might be saving for shoes. On level 2, they might be saving for a bicycle. On level 3, they might be saving for a car. And on level 4, these are the folks who can afford a vacation and maybe traveling on an airplane. So you will see things in common like how good their sanitation is, or whether they can have meat daily, or whether maybe that's something that they only have for a week. And so you're able to compare within a country and see that most countries have all 4 levels. So this way we can see the world as it is, and we can actually go in and there's little descriptions of each family. So I think these tools are really good ones for students to see so that they can learn and grow and actually consult with up-to-date statistics. Okay, so if we are moving through and communicating ideas, we know that, and I've asked students, if you see the global marketplace as this huge thing, how would you describe it? And they're like, well, it's interconnected, there's a lot of opportunity, but there's also risk. There's going to be job loss because there's going to be competition. There's tons of information to wade through in this global marketplace. It might be chaotic. They see it as chaotic. People around the world could come together for a common purpose. One student said, hopefully everyone will get something out of it, and that it's possible to have relationships with people that you would never meet. So I asked them, well, what skills will you need in order to be there? And they said, well, we need to educate ourselves on other cultures. We need to listen. We need to understand technology. We need access. We need soft skills. And we need a process for sifting through information. And I thought this is really good for a group of students just, in one class one day, coming up with all these different ideas. They understand how things are changing. They just need help getting there. And we know that everything isn't necessarily getting better. The world isn't perfect. There are challenges. But it is getting better in many measurable ways. And just because we can feel the change doesn't mean that we should neglect to pay attention to those ways that are getting better. Hans Rosling calls this the negativity effect, when we just sort of think the world is getting worse and we just look for how it's getting worse. So I put this up here to show you just a list of things that Hans has measured that are bad things that are decreasing, so this is his list, and good things that are increasing. So the bad things that are decreasing are legal slavery, oil spills, expensive solar panels, HIV infections, children dying, deaths in battle, countries with the death penalty, leaded gasoline, plane crash deaths, child labor, deaths from disaster, nuclear arms, smallpox, smoke particles, ozone depletion, surprisingly, and hunger. Isn't it great that there's less hunger? We just watched a video about 5 billion people moving out of extreme poverty. That's a tremendous amount of hunger that isn't there anymore, right? And then the good things that are increasing include protection for nature, women's right to vote, new music and films, got to get those arts in there, science, harvest, literacy, democracy, child cancer survival, girls in school, monitored species, electricity coverage, mobile phones, water, internet, and immunization. So these are all things that are getting measurably better, that are they're helping that graph, all that story move up. Stephen Radley, if we're going to talk about using diverse perspectives, we don't just look at one source and say, is this true? We confirm it with others. And Stephen Radley is an American scholar. He's a professor at Georgetown University who also tracks much of the same information. And he has got a great way of showing that putting a girl in school is like a chain reaction of good events for a whole nation. And watch how he shows this chain moving. He says a few decades ago, well, finally about 80% of girls now complete primary school. A few decades ago, that figure was below 50%. We've almost doubled the share of girls who are getting a primary education. And we know that when we educate a girl, she will have more income opportunities, she will get married later, she will have fewer children, and her children will be healthier, more likely to go to school, and have more income opportunities. We know these things with certainty, but there's still a long way to go. Many more girls need access, the quality of education needs to improve, and girls need to move from primary to secondary school. So when we understand exactly where we are, it's easier to know where we need to target our efforts so that we can amplify the good that is happening. There are rich and poor, and the gap is increasing. No, we've disproven that. Most people are in the middle. Most people, if you had to guess, if you're looking especially at anything on the Gapminder website, know that most places in the world already have girls in school, they already have electricity, they already have vaccines. Slow change is still change. Most of the human story is one of progress, and it's not without adversity, but it's still progress. So if we move to our last thought, how do we take action? Well, everybody gets to jump in their own way, but here at Wayne Community College, what we're going to do is we have started the North Carolina Scholars for Global Distinction. We know why people struggle to be optimistic. We can feel that things are changing. We know that we are sliding into one of those periods of testing where the choices we make will determine how we bounce back. But there is more good news. Recent studies in the last 10 years on resiliency give us powerful hope for how that is shaped. So Stephen M. Southwick and Dennis S. Charney's Resilience, the Science of Mastering Life's Greatest Challenges, identify resilience as the ability to bounce back after adversity or stress. They studied many people with this quality, thinking they would find highly resilient people as genetically gifted or rare. What they found instead is that resilience is common. When stress can be managed, quote, it tends to be very good and even necessary for health and growth. Without it, the mind and body weaken. If we can learn to harness stress, it can serve as a catalyst for developing greater strength and even greater wisdom, end quote. Highly resilient people confronted fear, possessed realistic optimism, accepted social support, imitated sturdy role models, exercised a moral compass, turned to religious or spiritual practices, and found a way to accept that which they could not change. Furthermore, they attended to their health, trained to be physically fit, mentally sharp, and emotionally strong. Most were active problem solvers who looked for meaning and opportunity in the midst of adversity, and sometimes even found humor in the darkness. They found that all resilient people accepted to an impressive degree responsibility for their own emotional well-being, and many used their traumatic experiences as a platform for personal growth. Hans Rosling does not call himself an optimist, but instead a possibilist, because he knows that we think of the term optimism as one that is naive. I'm not asking that we subscribe to Pollyanna, pie in the sky kind of hope, but instead a hope that is grounded in reality, that is based in fact, because we can hold on to a fact-based hope. It can frame our thinking and make us resilient. This is Hans Rosling's work, but it is not finished. He has given us tools, but we must use them and communicate them. So, teachers, students, find the people who are jazzed to help prepare you for this competitive and collaborative, volatile and expansive, culturally rich and economically innovative global marketplace. If you have a fact-based worldview, then you can understand what is to come. When we understand the present, we can improve and shape the future. So when we measure ourselves against a high standard, let's not forget to also look back and see how far we've come. Then go to the edge of what is known and look out. I guarantee we have enough to get started on this extremely important work. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Allison. That was really great. Just for the first question, while others are getting theirs put in the chat, I just was curious if you up there have any of the other results of the questions that you asked.
Oh, yes. I can pull them all up, actually.
Great.
Hold on just a second. Might take me just a second. Yes, let me think about this. I might have to pull them up because you know how you remember your password, sort of, and you kind of remember it, but on your own computer it saves it for you. Let's see. I know that I did write down one thing that I know is important about this. I did average all the results. So there were about 70 answers this afternoon before I came today. And I averaged all 10 questions. And I meant to say this before because we tied the chimps. It was 34%. So if you count 33, we actually beat the chimps technically. But yeah, so overall, the questions that are missed the most are the two that I put up. And then a lot of the other ones were about in the 30s, and there were a couple that were about 50. But there were no questions that were correct 54% of the time or more. So on average, I mean, there were people that got all of the questions right, but there were some that maybe only one person got right. So on average, we don't understand really how things are.
All right. Well, another question we have is, how can being a global scholar build resilience in students?
Well, I think that that's a good question. I think resilience is about looking at what the problems are in the world and being able to understand them. And if we understand, we have Charlotte in the audience who understands how important history informs us as we move forward. Global scholars look to collaborate. A lot of the times, I know in Ms. Fraley's class and in my class, we put students together to work on projects so that they have to talk to each other. This helps them have some of those soft skills that students realized they needed, but it also helps them investigate, share information, test it out before they write it in a paper. A lot of times students will correct or challenge another student's ideas, and if they're working on a team, it's not necessarily that they're challenging it in a way to disagree or fight. A lot of times it's like, well, I don't know if that's true, or I don't think that source is a great source. You know, in English, one of the things that we try and do is get the students to understand what sources to use so that they don't just use anything. You know, what is a quality, that's one reason why I gave Rossling's credentials first, so we know why we're listening to him. But I think it builds resiliency to persevere, to work through a problem, to understand it. And I mean, all of those qualities we're not going to get if we shy away and do things that are easy. We have to do things that are meaningful.
Okay, great. Another question is, with business and media becoming more international, what resources would you suggest for those who are looking to expand their understanding of diverse perspectives?
Okay, so what resources? The Asia Society has many resources. They actually have so many for teachers. They have lesson plans already set up, and they also have short little videos to help teachers as well. And everything from CTE, which I think sometimes the CTE teachers don't have as many resources maybe. Well, at least the Asia Society has many. And they have a great website that you could get lost in. The United States Institute of Peace has offered all of their coursework for free through the end of the year. And you can take a class if you're an art teacher on how the arts pull people back together. It helps you understand that there's a difference between negative peace and positive peace. Negative peace is just where there's force, so there's no violence. But positive peace is where you have systems of justice in place, and that creates a foundation where society can really grow and prosper. So those are two. I can post more if there are a lot. Worldview has quite a few as well.
Okay. Another question is, what is your greatest wish for this program? I believe they're talking about the program that you've started.
Oh, wow. That if we build it, people will come. I think that students will take the courses because it's easy to take them. There are already courses they would need to take anyway. Courses that have the word culture or world or international or intercultural, as Ms. Fraley's class, intercultural communications, all of those are already automatically inherently global. And then there are some classes like my English class that I've made global. And so that piece, there's only 15 hours that students have to take. But I would love to see a campus that is thriving and bustling with activity and conversation and purpose. I think that if we set really high goals for students and we give them enough of a framework to explore how to get there, they bring their creativity to real world problems. And the challenge is more meaningful than maybe some of the things that, you know, we could do in the past. I'm not saying that global education is the only way to go. It is a good way.
Okay, well, we have one more that came through.
Okay.
How can we spread the facts in an age of social media, memes, and conspiracy theories that direct people away from the truth?
That is a wonderful question. And it's one that we are constantly trying to show students how to do for themselves, because we can do it in a classroom and filter through and try, but it's difficult, and especially if you're being bombarded by all of these other things, people sharing information. There's an organization I would highly recommend, and this is maybe another thing for your resources page, IREX, they work with the State Department providing grants for teachers to travel overseas and to come here, like the Fulbright Scholarship. And they have created it's a how to detect misinformation campaign called Learn to Discern. And it is free. And then they also have a version of it on the Great Courses for anybody who's interested in the Great Courses. And it asks us to look at how we use the media. How do we track it? How do we find sources? How do we judge whether something is credible, if it's current, if it's accurate? Does it have the conventions of scholarship, like references, and then also, does it have bias? Is it trying to make you angry? This is one of the best things about the IREX program. If you read something and you feel inflamed, one of their simplest tricks is just stop and name the feeling. Just the moment of stopping and naming the feeling short circuits the feeling. And then it gives you just a moment to look at it and say, is this attempting to make me angry? Is this attempting to manipulate me? And we try and teach that bias is a way of not respecting the reader. Because we're trying to empower students, and our classroom is like a little globe. We've got people from all over in our classroom who have different perspectives, and we have to respect their ability to and honor those perspectives at the same time as challenging them to think critically. And so I think that Learn to Discern program is really a good one. And then Dinez Tuck and I worked on a sheet that we're using for one of the PLOs that teachers are using in their classroom, and it's kind of a similar thing. It's assessing sources. And it's just a one-sheet handout that the college made beautiful for us. Ken Jones made beautiful for us, and it looks great. So if anybody needs that or wants that, we'd be happy to share it.
Well, thank you, Allison. That was our last question. Thank you so much for presenting tonight.
Thank you.
You've gotten a lot of great feedback in the chat that you'll need to check out later.
Okay.
So thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much.